LGBTQ Banned Book Club, The Breakaways with Cathy G. Johnson. Across the country, states are banning books with LGBTQ content. That's why Queer News Tonight is starting a book club. So excited. The LGBTQ Banned Book Club. Tonight, we present a special interview with Cathy G. Johnson, author of the banned book, The Breakaways. Watch this.
Well, up next, let's welcome author and artist Cathy G. Johnson. Cathy is coming to us tonight from Providence, Rhode Island, where she makes comics, drawings, prints, and writes books about youth, confrontation, and sincerity. She draws inspiration from her own life and community. Cathy's first graphic novel, Jeremiah, debuted in 2013. Her second book, Gorgeous, was published in 2016. And her most recently banned book, The Breakaways, yes, I said banned book, was released in 2019. In addition to her writing and artwork, she is also an educator and scholar, teaching various art classes and workshops throughout New England and North America. Cathy has been teaching since 2012 and earned her master's degree in teaching and learning in art and design from the Rhode Island School of Design in 2017. To our delight, she is going to share her experiences and research on her education website that she participates in, comicarted.com. And she also is a co-host, a scholarship podcast where they discuss comics in historical and educational context called Drawing a Dialogue. We're very happy to have with us tonight Cathy Johnson. Good evening, Cathy.
Hi, Al.
Well, we're excited. First off, you're a member of the LGBTQ plus community. We get that out there. You identify as queer and trans, and it's a time for both being trans and it is a time to in being an author, and it's an interesting moment, intersection of our LGBTQ world. Let's begin with the books that you've written. Tell us a little bit, the three books that you've written. Tell us a little bit about the experience of why you do it and how you represent in our community. What do you pursue in your writing?
So I have been interested in comic books since I was a child. I love what comic books are able to communicate, and the rich possibilities of using words and images. As you said, like my master's degree is in the educational benefits of comics. I think comics can achieve a lot, and I think it's a very accessible medium as well. Like you just need to pick it up and start reading. I enjoy making comic books for all sorts of audiences, of all sorts of life experiences, and that does include LGBTQ people.
The three books that you've done, I'm curious in terms of your interest in comics. We have reported at Queer News Tonight a lot of what is going on at DC and Marvel and at Disney in terms of representation in comics and the growing lesbian reflection and gay and even trans. What do you think about what's going on in mainstream comic work in America? Is it a good thing? Have you been happy about what you've seen?
So I actually work in the independent comics world where it's more art focused and people get to express whatever they want to express. And then that differs from mainstream where you have a larger market and you have a larger audience. And there's a lot more pressure on making your work accessible to a broader audience, right? And so what we have seen is that there's a lot more queer YA books for young adults and for teenagers. And my book, The Breakaways, is actually for middle schoolers. So that is a new audience for these books.
Do you have a different response from middle school young readers, different that identify as heterosexual versus in LGBTQ plus? Do they react differently to the material you put in front of them?
I think it's middle school is a time of self-discovery, right? So it's a time of finding out who you are, of exploring different identities. It's a time of questioning. So when I bring my books, oftentimes I'll have kids who are excited, and who knows how they identify, because that's a time of self-discovery, really. I mean, that's what middle school is all about. So I've had kids from all experiences who are excited to read my books.
Yeah, that sounds great. Of course, the elephant in the room is what we're watching. You know, we're broadcasting this interview. I'm in Florida, and we are in full-on battle here in Florida from the LGBTQ community with Tallahassee over the Woke Act, and of course, Don't Say Gay. And next will be books. In focusing what can be touched in schools, middle schools, and elementary, high school, etc. I'm curious about what you think is going on and what has gone on for the trans community. Let's start there. Over what we've watched in the last a couple of years, President Biden becomes president, and we thought, well, everything's going to change now. And it actually seems like today things are even a little rougher. What do you think about, from your seat and your experience, and as an author and trans in the LGBTQ community, what do you think about the state of affairs that we're watching in America?
Well, I find it very upsetting, right? I think I want rights. I want equal rights for everyone. I want kids to be able to express themselves and get access to whatever they need.
Upsetting, is it? I heard that you have been asked, because of all of the controversy that's been going on in representation from trans, what the Republicans have framed over the issue, and content in books, and what we have seen, that you have shied away from interviews from mainstream media. Is that correct?
Yes, I have turned down a lot of interviews.
Yeah. And
it seems like...
No, please. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
It seems like there is a lot of attention given to the book being banned, but there isn't a lot of attention on to the sort of larger macrocosm of what is happening. Like, the book itself isn't the problem. The problem is the larger the larger cultural shift that's happening, right? And so I have been saying no to a lot of interviews because it seems like they want to sensationalize the book being banned, and what we would need to be focusing on is why.
Yeah. Well, help us understand. I think I have a fundamental understanding of my question, but help all of us, me and our listeners, help us understand from your perspective, why is this happening? Why do you think it's actually getting worse for us? Donald Trump's no longer president of the United States, but the shadow of the former president is long and deep. DeSantis here in Florida, and multiple senators, McCarthy in the House, the minority leader. Why is it happening? From your seat, why do you think it is happening?
I mean, I think there's a sort of a fear of the unknown. I think there's like a fear of, and then wanting to sort of control what's happening in schools and what people think is happening. So like the book is being banned in schools, and it's because there's a transgender character in the book. And it seems like that this is a conversation that parents theoretically don't want to be having with their kids, but there are transgender kids who need to be having these conversations. Yeah. And everyone needs to be. No, everyone needs to be, because everyone is going to be occupying the same world with each other. So we all need to understand each other.
The book that you're referring to, I believe, with the trans character is The Breakaways. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, that's your 2019 book, and help us understand, help the LGBTQ community understand what's occurring, because the character, or because there is a trans character in the book. The response is to ban the book in schools, in some schools, just because of the mere existence of trans. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, and I think there's a sort of as an educator, and an author, I think there's sort of a fundamental misunderstanding on what being transgender is. It's not inherently inappropriate for a younger age. Like, people being transgender isn't inherently inappropriate, as we all know. But I think there's sort of a misunderstanding and bigotry that sort of evolves from that misunderstanding in what it means to be transgender.
When we get into conversations about people making decisions about banning books, I think about many movies where I have seen this moment. By the way, go back and watch Footloose. It's a great movie. I read an article in the Houston Chronicle talking about a school district in Texas, Spring Branch, that banned the novel, and their justification was that it was inappropriate for the students in the school or schools where they banned it. But I want to make sure that I'm clear again. What they're saying is inappropriate for the students is the mere existence of a transgender character, not because of actions, not because of intention, not because of any other adjectives or definitions, just mere existence. Do I have that correct?
Yes.
Well, let's go back to your why question again on why you've avoided so many of the mainstream interviews focusing on it. The why then is just a rejection of existence? Do you think that's what's occurring?
I think there's sort of wanting this desire to justify their bigotry, right? So there's sort of a misunderstanding of like visual literacy problems, right? Where they hear about this book and then they sort of imagine how horrible it is. And I think this happens to all books that are banned and films that are banned, right? Where it's just like, it could be a very short and simple scene. I mean, this is gay history, right? There could be a very small scene in reference to something, and that just gets blown out of proportion, right? When it is just part of life, and it should be in our art. Life should be in art, right?
I read an editorial recently. I'm curious. I am going to summarize it for you, but I'm just curious on your reaction as a person, a trans person in the LGBTQ community, and a writer, author that has now had a book banned in school. I read an editorial that said, it's an interesting intersection with 1959, and that there were books that had black prominent characters in them that certain states in the Union said were inappropriate for white students in schools to read, and they justified book bans. It is hard to imagine that a book could be, critical race theory is a different argument. It is hard to imagine a book like yours that focused on 5 or 6 black 6th to 8th graders interacting with each other would be banned simply because they were black, and that we're watching what we went through in 1958 and 1959 all over again. What's your reaction of that intersection of making the comparison to how we handled race 50 and 60 years ago and how we're handling LGBT and trans today?
Well, intersectionality is real, right? So there are black trans people who have their lived experiences. And I think, I think, and then the books are also being banned for what is supposedly critical race theory, when really they're just children's books that have Black characters in them by Black authors. I think it's difficult to compare oppressions, right? I think we need to have solidarity with everyone.
Cathy, I'm curious, with what has happened in the last 12 months, this book came out in 2019 and banned in some school districts now. Does it affect your writing process, your creative process? Does it chill your desire to incorporate trans or other LGBT characters in stories that you might be developing? Does it have any kind of adverse effect in your decision making of your writing?
I want to represent all people and all kids in my books, and that is always going to include trans characters and gay characters.
So does that mean more books are coming that are going to include those characters?
Yes. I'm not going to stop.
Yeah. Okay. So you're defiant there. I'm also curious in terms of the labeling. You know, we're talking about this branding image coming from Queer News Tonight and the LGBTQ community. We're, after all, Queer News Tonight, of talking about an LGBTQ book club. You know, we watched what Oprah does. We watch what Jenna Bush does on the Today Show. We participate and help promote LGBT themes at the Miami Book Fair. New Orleans is getting ready to begin, etc. And we're talking about classifying an LGBTQ book club and put banned in front of it. And we've talked about that very specifically because of the marketing, of incendiary marketing of the banned LGBTQ book club. And we've had conversation about that to illustrate where we are in large swaths of America, of the way they think about books and their free inclination to ban them. What do you think about that, of the idea of having a banned LGBTQ book club? It's incendiary. Do you think it is the kind of message we want to represent in LGBT, or do you disagree with that?
I mean, I think it's interesting. So censorship is also kind of insidious, right? So there's censorship in just the fact something might not get published in order to be banned. So I think I think in order to get banned, you need to have already have given opportunities, right? So I almost think that I'd rather have these books not banned.
Right. And we would like to be able to say gay in schools in Florida, but our fight is long and vast. I hear you loud and clear, Cathy. I'm curious, what are you working on now? What are you going to be working on next?
I'm working on a young adult graphic novel right now. I also have a few more pitches in the hopper if any publishers are watching and want to talk to me.
Yeah. Okay. And any idea in terms of a timeline of developing that?
Oh boy, graphic novels take a really long time. Probably 2025.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. You do know this is 2022, right? You do know that.
Yes, I do know.
Yeah. I'm curious, Cathy, I really do appreciate you being able to talk to us. You have a very interesting seat, which is why mainstream media has pursued you. You're in two different buckets, really three different buckets, because you represent LGBT, you represent strongly the T in our acronym, and then you're a writer who has been banned. So I can understand why they would pursue you. I appreciate you doing this interview. It helps our LGBTQ community understand what you face, and that's what you're doing here. So you're helping all of us. How, that being said, with what you face and how difficult it is to be a writer in America in 2022, especially if you're in those buckets, how do you not get discouraged with what you face? You're going to be talking to a lot of transgender people that'll watch this interview that have a tough time getting up out of bed in the morning with the way that they're discriminated against or hated on, or even the risk of violence or even murder. against them. How do you overcome the kinds of rejection that you face? What helps you just move on?
My queer siblings, right? We're a family. Finding people who you can have solidarity with, finding your neighbors, finding your community. We all have support for each other. And in terms of writing, there's all sorts of, you can self-publish, there's all sorts of stuff where you can get your voice out there without being told no.
And speaking of that, you can also come on to Queer News Tonight and talk about your books. Where do we find you? Let's make sure that we help. Let's bypass that school district in Texas and others. Where do we find you, and how do we go about doing it?
Well, you can ask for my book, The Breakaways. It's available from any independent bookstore, also the big chains, but let's go independent. Okay. And you can just ask them and they'll order it.
Okay. And can you go on to Amazon? I know that's the ultimate big one. But
it is on Amazon.
Yeah, okay, exactly. All right. Well, we wish you all the luck, Cathy. It's a perilous time. But I know people watching this interview are going to come away with a representative from the LGBTQ plus community that is trans, that is a writer, that has faced already book bans, and is positive and smiles as much as you do. It's very encouraging in terms of where we are, because we will be able to overcome. We just must stay in the fight. And that's what you're doing. Cathy Johnson, thank you. Cathy Jensen, thank you very much for being with us at Queer News Tonight.
Thank you so much, Al.
LGBTQ plus news is vital for our community and for the broader world as a whole. We have enough enemies at Fox News. Tucker, Sean, and Laura are loud. We need passionate allies. Happening Out television network, Queer News Tonight, and It's Happening Out are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. Our community needs your support. Like this broadcast and subscribe now to ensure the growth of the entire LGBTQ